Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Cultivating the Next Generation of Philanthropists with Associate Boards. I'm Nick Centineo, Senior Investment Consultant with Manning & Peers Endowment Foundation Service. And I think this is a topic that touches on a lot of the key trends that, if you're a frequent caller into our webinars, you've probably heard us mention before. Generational shifts, succession, volunteerism, new forms of marketing and communication. These are topics that nonprofits are having to navigate today. And what we've heard from a number of the organizations that we work with is that an associate board can really be a great way to tap into these trends. What we wanted to answer today are questions like, what is an associate board and what are the benefits that a lot of organizations see from them? But also, we wanted to spend a good deal of time talking about tips to help you get started or to keep your associate board thriving if you already have one. And that's really what today's all about. It's actionable ideas and real-world examples that can help all of you in the audience today. So to guide us through this discussion, I'm very pleased to welcome three experts when it comes to all things associate boards. Nicole Berman and Bob Russell are both with the American Diabetes Association. Manning & Peer has a very close working relationship with the ADA, having previously been the title sponsor for the Tour de Cure, which is their premier fundraising event. And we're very happy to continue that relationship, and especially to tap the knowledge they have in starting an associate board and running one effectively. Nicole is an associate director of development. She's worked in nonprofit fundraising and event planning for the last 8 years. She's the former Rochester chair of the U of R's Young Alumni Council and has been a Rochester Young Professionals board member since 2016. And actually in 2018, Nicole was the one to head up the launch of the ADA's Associate Leadership Board, so certainly an experience we'd like to hear more about. Welcome, Nicole. And Bob was named the Upstate New York Area Executive Director for the American Diabetes Association in 2016. In this role, he oversees their offices in Rochester, Buffalo, Albany, and Syracuse. And prior to joining the ADA, he was the CEO of Gilda's Club Rochester. He served as chairman of the International Affiliate Council of Cancer Support Community, which represented over 50 cancer support affiliates worldwide. He was the executive director of the Little Theater Film Society, director of marketing for Jiva Theater Center, and spent 18 seasons as an executive in the professional sports industry with the Buffalo Sabres Hockey Club, Rochester Americans Hockey Club, and Rochester Rhinos Soccer Club. You'll have to let us know what you think of the Sabres off-season move, Bob, if you have time.
I have some thoughts.
And finally, from Manning & Peer, we're joined by Tracy Leganelli, an up-and-comer here at the company. Tracy is the public relations specialist here at Manning. She's a co-president of a local nonprofit that provides free programming and support to men, women, teens, and kids affected by cancer. And most pertinent for today, she's also a member of an associate board on another local nonprofit. She oversees 25 young professionals to promote awareness of their group, organize various fundraising initiatives, and empower a new generation of philanthropic leaders in the community. So thanks, Tracy, for joining us too. Just a few housekeeping items to cover before we get started. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them throughout the webinar using the question box on the right. When we conclude today's prepared questions, we'll spend any remaining time answering questions that have been submitted. If we run short on time and are unable to answer your question, we will personally follow up with you after the webinar. And then for your convenience, a recording of this webinar will also be available for replay. Okay, so I think we're ready to get started then. Everyone, again, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you on behalf of our audience, for sharing all of your experiences today. I think a great place to start is, with some definitions. What is an associate board to you?
Sure, this is Tracy. So while we're seeing associate boards becoming more popular, seeing them pop up all over nonprofits in the area, there's still a lot of questions about what they actually are. So I find myself answering this question a lot, and Bob and Nicole, I'm sure that you probably do too. But essentially, associate boards are boards for nonprofits that are made up of young professionals. They usually help to fill a gap that exists with the board of directors. Associate boards can help with fundraising, planning and executing events, marketing, public relations, social media. A lot of times they're comfortable with using technology. And really the goal is for the associate board to work in tandem with the board and the staff of a nonprofit and really be a helpful asset in achieving its mission.
That's exactly right, Tracy. For the American Diabetes Association,
we had the idea back in late 2017, early 2018 to increase our demographic reach. And from idea to conception to reality, it took about 6 months of recruiting in order to establish our associate leadership board. Our goal was to have 12 members, and so launching in January of 19, at that point in time, we had 11 members. So we did spend a solid 6 months recruiting the right people. And our board also has quarterly meetings, and we hope to grow to up to 15 members by the end of this year.
Yeah, Nicole, I think that's great. It's really good background to see sort of how you did it. I'd also like to hear more about sort of what was the rationale, why start an associate board, and what you guys, the rationale behind sort of why you went down that road to a few years ago.
Sure. So we have known that at the American Diabetes Association, we also have a community leadership board. It's mostly made up of older professionals who have been connected to the ADA for many, many years, sort of the same people. But diabetes is a disease that does not discriminate, and in fact, we have a lot of younger people who are looking to get more involved. So we know our audience, and we were seeking to expand on that diversity of age, race, and gender. And we know that there's a lot of energy in young professionals to attend new events, to be present in the community, and thought that this was a great opportunity to get started.
And I think it really helps us to bridge a gap between what the needs of the organization are with what the needs of the community are. With a community leadership board, and for some organizations, they would actually be their governance board. You might have 20 to 25 people, but again, you've got a little bit of an older demographic, more established professionals sitting on those boards. And this really gives you the opportunity to be able to tap into, some of the up and coming and newer talent that there is out there. And also add a different level of enthusiasm behind what you're doing. I think from an organization health standpoint as well, the 25 to 40-year-old demographic is one of the hardest to reach for support services, whether it's for diabetes, whether it's for cancer, or any of the other diseases that there are. And this allows you the opportunity as an organization to really be able to create a peer-to-peer discussion for people. And I know it was quite effective when I was at Gilda's Club with the Gilda's Club board, because you have a lot of teenagers and young adults that are diagnosed with cancer, just like you have a lot that are living with diabetes, and it just creates a different discussion when our ambassadors out there on the street are also the people in their own age group that are helping to support the work that's being done by the organization.
I think it's also important to note that there's a great wealth transfer that's happening now and over the next 10 years. So $9 trillion will transfer from one generation to the next. And really the greatest opportunity with this great wealth transfer is among women and millennials, and they just so happen to be more inclined to make charitable donations too.
Yeah, I think that's a good point on the wealth transfer, because it's a point we've mentioned to our audience before. And it's a good benefit too to associate boards. I'm interested in hearing, what you guys think about other benefits, both from the perspective of like someone who sits on an associate board, what you get out of it, but also the nonprofit itself, what the nonprofit gets out of having an associate board.
Sure. I think there are a number of benefits to having an associate board in addition to having your board of directors. So an associate board can really let the board of directors focus on the overall governance and financial health of the organization. And associate boards really are a way to cultivate the next generation of leaders and donors. So I've seen associate board members that have moved up to go and sit on the board of directors. And it's helpful because they already have a really good understanding of how the board operates, how the organization operates, and they really know what's expected of them. And then they can kind of foster that relationship with the associate board too. Associate boards can also be a strategy in your recruiting. So an associate board shows that you're really thinking about the next generation and the future for your organization. That's definitely important to future employees.
And I think an important part of this is finding a balance between a benefit for the organization, but also a benefit for the people that are sitting on the board. And I know these are things that, Nicole and I talked through as we were looking to create this at the Diabetes Association, because everybody wants to be involved, they want to help, they want to feel good, but at the end of the day, there's got to be something for them. So as Tracy mentioned, one thing is, I've always looked at associate board as kind of being a farm team, using sports vernacular.
Yeah.
That, you're training as a younger professional, you're learning, and eventually you want to move your way up to the majors, which might be sitting on a governance board. So that's one benefit for the organization, is that you have people that are going through and they're learning about the organization and able to take those skills and help us to move forward as well. I think the other thing it does is it offers a great opportunity networking for young professionals, because, like, for instance, in July, we just had a joint meeting with our 2 community leadership boards in Buffalo and Rochester and our associate leadership board. So they have an opportunity to sit and meet other people, more senior level executives, that can help them network with their careers. The other thing that was really important for us this year was we added the chair of the associate board onto the community leadership board. So they have a seat at that table every meeting, every month, being able to report out what they're working on, and then also being able to hear what's happening at the board level. So as Nicole had mentioned, trying to help fill some of those gaps. And I think in today's not-for-profit world, where we have smaller and smaller staff sizes and higher revenue goals, the benefit of an associate leadership board is being able to have another fundraising arm. And I'll use Gilda's Club Rochester as an example. The board created a bachelor auction, which I think the first year did $5,000, which was great. And then it started to grow and grow and grow. And next thing you know, it's up over $40,000 a year that event was bringing in. Well, that became part of the organization's budget. So the organization was relying on the associate board to actually run that event and that revenue. And I think that really made everybody feel that the work that they were doing was vital to the organization. It wasn't like they were just, setting up a lemonade stand somewhere to raise a few dollars to help something. But once it becomes a part of the budget for the organization, I think that shows the recognition and also the respect that the organization has for the leadership board.
And a huge benefit, I think what you said about the lack of personnel sometimes to help out, having that additional set of volunteers can be a huge benefit for an organization that doesn't have a lot of resources.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And now I'd like to talk a little bit too about tips for starting a board. So step into the shoes of an organization that maybe doesn't have one, and then you've sort of been there a few years ago. So maybe walk us through your process for starting one and sort of your experience with that whole process.
At the ADA last year, when we started the Associate Leadership Board, we created a job description. The job description was for all general members, with additional paragraphs and information as needed for the leadership roles. We defined the chairperson, a marketing chair, and an engagement chair as the 3 leaders, sort of the executive committee of this first-year board. The expectations were outlined very clearly there, from the term limits to the expectation of give or get. And also the chairs were very aware of how they would oversee the board for the term. I think that everyone needs to feel that they have ownership. So, we chose 12 to 15 members as the maximum size for our board right now. It's manageable, because that means that everyone still has a voice, they have an active role, and it's also, it allows for growth, finding new professional fields that, as people roll off, we can fill in the gaps, whether it's, we need someone in finance, we need someone in an HR role. Having that diversity allows for us to increase our presence with other companies in the community to help the ADA.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Another thing, I've had the fortune and misfortune of trying to help other organizations based on the success that we've had at different organizations I've been with, to either help start a board or talk them out of starting, a young leadership board. Because the first thing that is paramount is that you have to treat this just like you are dealing with any other aspect of your business. You have to have a plan. You have to make your goals very clear cut, especially for the board members that are coming in, and you have to give it the time to nurture. You can't just automatically say, we want to put this group together and they're going to go out and they're going to raise X number of dollars without having that way to help get them there. And I think, you have to be very agile at the beginning. You have a vision of where you want to see it go to, but after the first 2 months, things might change. Yeah. And you have to be ready to make those shifts, because that is setting the table for the future of this organization, and for that board. And I think organizations that go into it just thinking, well, we'll just get a bunch of young professionals together and tell them we want them to raise some money, and then not pay a lot of attention to them, are most destined for failure within a year and a half. Yeah. So even with small staffs, having someone who has a pulse on it, someone who is their direct relationship within the organization that they can run things off of, is really important. And if you don't have the time to be able to nurture it, then you shouldn't take the time to try and start it.
Yeah, and in my experience, I think one of the most important things you can do when starting an associate board is, like Nicole mentioned, just to make sure you have a goal clearly outlined. So each year as an associate board, we get together and we come up with a goal. Most of the times it's financial, but it could be to maybe start a new event. And so we make sure that it's communicated clearly among our associate board, to the board of directors, and to the staff. This way it's clearly communicated and everyone knows what they're working towards together. And I think, like, Bob had mentioned too, these financial goals become part of, our financial goal is a line item in the organization's budget. So if we come in under, that unfortunately affects our forecasting. So it's important to be realistic in setting that budget of what you think that your associate board can actually fundraise in that given amount of time, and just being transparent and communicating that too. And forming an executive committee for us has been really helpful for our associate board. So we have 2 co-presidents, a treasurer, a membership chair, and then a communications social media chair. And so our group meets quarterly outside of our regularly scheduled associate board meetings, and they're really the ones that are kind of the smaller group that are keeping the larger associate board on track to meet our goals. We do have a handbook and bylaws too that are that we made that are off of the board of directors bylaws, and I think that that's super helpful too, just because it clearly outlines the organization's mission, vision, the role of the associate board, the role of the board, key organization staff members, and highlights our events and our committees. And it's a useful tool when we onboard new associate board members. And if you're looking to start one, to create one, usually your board of directors has one, so you can use it as a starting point.
Do you think there's anything anything that organizations think about that are holding them back? Like, what are the major obstacles to starting an associate board?
I think the time commitment, them not knowing that's an unknown. How long will it take us to create this? How much time do we have to put into it? Nicole had talked about the fact that, we were able to go out and secure a chair and identify those people, right? Identify the leadership. They have to be a part of that. And I think a lot of organizations feel they have to control every string along the way, rather than finding some of that core leadership early on and letting them help to cultivate and vet. And we do have a vetting process that we go through with all potential members, because, we want to make sure that we are getting that diversity on the board. I think the other thing is that sometimes you can be unrealistic. If you hear that, Gilda's Club Associate Board, raised $30,000, organizations are thinking, well, we can do that too. Well, that took a series of years and a series of trials and tribulations to get to. Yep. So I think for them, it's about being realistic with the time, not just for the organization, but the time that you're expecting from your members to be involved. And then also what that financial commitment is. We have on our community leadership board, which is our senior level board, it's a $5,000 give or get. On the associate leadership board, it's a $1,000 give or get. So we're not necessarily expecting somebody to write a check, but to help us open doors to conversations, maybe with their company or a friend of theirs works somewhere else. Because the more people we're able to engage that way, I think the broader reach you can have with your message as the organization. But you have to know that you're going to have that commitment, because that's also where you kind of weed out some people. They might be real energetic and ready to go early on, and then life gets in the way, right? They get a promotion at work, or they find out they have to travel more, or, they're going to start a family.
Yep.
That's all great things, but you also have to make sure that if they're not, able to make, the meetings that there are, or respond to emails that are going out, not helping to open any of those doors, that kind of shows you where there's a disengagement. And it might be time to let them know that, hey, it's okay that, you've got a different life than you did a year ago. We just need to move on, let you move on and fill that space.
Bob had addressed the limited staff time as well. It's also important to consider how you'd like this to function from your organization's perspective. Does it make sense for a staff member to completely oversee your associate board? Will they dictate the meeting structures and the outlines every single time you meet, or will they just serve as a liaison to the organization? You might determine that based on the resources that you have available.
Do you guys have any suggestions for like recruiting good people? Because I imagine like that might be a big obstacle to some, right? Like, can we find enough people, enough good people to fill up our board?
Yeah, I think starting with your mission and reaching out to people that have been involved with your organization, with your mission. So, for ADA, it was looking at, oh, hey, we know this person's been involved with the Tour de Cure, riding in the past, the team captain, supporting it, living with diabetes themselves. That's a key to it, because you could, I don't want this to come across wrong, but you don't want somebody who just wants to add something to their resume.
Yep.
Right? They have to have a connection to what you're doing. And I think once you start getting some of those pieces put in place, their outreach to their peer group starts to realize, like, oh, hey, I've got a friend. I never realized that, their mom lives with type 1 diabetes, so they used to have to give her shots or whatever it might be. And I think that's the best recruitment, is based on what the mission of the organization is, trying to find people that have a connection, because you can always tell the people that don't have any touch points, whether it's cancer or diabetes, because they're just not as engaged in what it is that you're doing, and they're not as interested in it. The other thing that I think was important for us was we are really looking this year with, starting the Rochester board and being able to use that as a launching pad to bring into our other markets. As part of our upstate region. So, Buffalo has been looking at what's happening with this board and talking to Nicole. They feel that they're in the position now to start setting up their associate leadership board moving forward into 2020. Same thing with our Albany market. So we're really trying to make sure that we weren't having everybody trying at the same time, but let's create the framework that works for us and this organization, because everyone is different, every organization, but then bring the strength of that into, the rest of our region.
Yeah, great insight there. I think it's a really good story about how you guys have sort of built it up from basically nothing. But let's say you have a board, you have an associate board set up, right? You've taken the first step. What tips do you have for maximizing that impact? And I know it's an investment that takes time to mature, but what tips would you say that our listeners can take to really maximizing the impact of a board they might have?
Sure. So one of the things I think that's super important is to kind of set up these key performance indicators that will kind of be regular check-ins to make sure that you're on your way to achieving your goal. So for us, our associate board meets every other month. So we ask our treasurer to give a regular financial update just to make sure that we're on track to meet our goal. Then we also have different event committees. So we ask for updates for all those different event committees to make sure that they're also on track to meet their goals. It is a requirement to sit on those event committees. So we really are trying to maximize everybody's time so they can choose something that they feel most passionate about.
That's actually a great transition to how the ADA, our Associate Leadership Board's very first meeting, we asked every single new board member to come with their passion project, what it is that they got involved for, and something tangible that they'd like to do in the upcoming year. And that first meeting, we left with 3 subcommittees created around the 3 priority areas. So that included advocacy, it included a brand new fundraising event. Actually, I think it was 2 fundraising events. So the group as a whole broke out based on their interests, and that is what is guiding them for all of 2019, and we'll probably start off 2020 doing the same thing.
I think the other thing is making sure that we are keeping them informed of things that are happening, in our industry and things that are changing. So whether it's a health bill, aimed toward insulin affordability, just as we would be keeping our community leadership board, keeping the associate leadership board, because you have to look at it. These are people that are out on the street as an outreach for your organization. The more that they know of what's happening, the more they can craft their personal story around it. So when they're out there talking, for me personally, I'm out there talking as someone who lives with type 1 diabetes every single day, not just somebody who works for the organization. So that's how I frame my discussion, is how am I helping the people just like me? And I think that's what, our associate leadership board do, because they're proud to be involved with, these boards and these organizations and to be an arm of them. If they don't know the latest and greatest that just got announced by the organization, then they don't feel like we value them. And we have to make sure that they always feel that they're valued, but also they're such an important part of the work that we're trying to do and the message we're trying to deliver into the community.
Yeah, great tips. Any final remarks you guys want to cover?
I would piggyback off of what Bob said. In our experience too, I think that communication between the associate board, the board, and then the organization staff, I think that just is crucial to kind of making sure, regular check-ins, making sure that you're keeping everybody informed. I think that that's crucial to maximize, the board and the associate board's impact for your organization.
Great. Thank you all so much, for sharing your experience. I think this is extremely helpful to our audience, and I think you all really demonstrated just the positive impact that associate boards can have. So thank you again. As a reminder, you can submit questions right on the form on your screen. So please feel free to do that now. Before we reply to any questions, though, I did just want to take 1 minute to remind our audience about Manning & Peers Endowment and Foundation Service. For nonprofits, we recognize the importance of connecting an organization's investment results with their real-world goals. What we do is provide solutions to reach these goals, whether that solution is on the investment side or the fundraising side. And we really like to try to bridge both areas. And we developed a service for endowments foundations that address these needs. Major areas of support include fundraising consulting, objective setting and asset allocation, spending policy design, cash flow modeling, and board and staff education. And on an annual basis, our team of consultants provides a consolidated monitoring report to clients in order to help assess how an organization has progressed towards its goals, and then, if necessary, suggest an action plan for changes going forward. So if you're interested in learning more about the Endowment and Foundation Service, please just contact your Manning & Peer representative or check out our website. We're always happy to have a conversation.